Good morning to everybody. Thanks you very much for being here. We are a little bit late because we came walking from the Villa Schifanoia in order to show to Hans-Gert Pöttering how scattered we are around the Badia. It's not so long, no? It's a nice walk.
Very nice.
People from time complain that they have to walk from one building to another, but it is a nice walk, especially when the Tuscany sun is shining, like in this wonderful autumn that we are enjoying. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, professors, ricercatores, members of the EUI staff, I want to wish to all of you to participate on this warm welcome of this inaugural event for our newly established Debating Europe series. And it's a great pleasure that my former colleague, Dr. Hans-Gert Pöttering, will be the first speaker in this series. Hans-Gert Pöttering is, above all, a true European. Yes, it is the best way of introducing you, and as is said in your biography, he never knew his father, who was killed in the final days of World War II, and this personal tragedy was instrumental in shaping his political involvement and his career in European politics. You told me many times when we were together in the European Parliament that you never know your father, he was killed, and the war among Europeans is something that has been avoided forever. You are a real European. You have been proving that during the many years that you served as a member of the European Parliament, as chairman of the Popular Party group, because Hans-Gert Pöttering belongs to the Popular Party group. Nobody is perfect.
I will give my response.
But in spite of that, we had a very, very, very good cooperation. I am very happy that he can be here not only as a former President of the European Parliament, you already have one, not only as a member of the European Parliament for many years. How many years?
I'm the only surviving since 1979.
Since 1979. So it's a long-standing career, but he's here mainly as chairman of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, a very important institution in European politics, in German politics. You are chairing a board in which the Chancellor Merkel is sitting. So you are giving the floor to Chancellor Merkel.
If she does not take it herself.
In any case, it's a way of showing how important it is, the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. I think we can have links of cooperation because the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation has a very important scientific activities. And I would like to use this opportunity for you to know more and better about what we are doing here in the European University Institute. Hans-Gert Pöttering has already a quite impressive academic background. He studied law, political science, and history. Law, political science, and history. Three of our branches of our PhD program. In Bonn, International Institute, in the Institute for International Relationship in Geneva, in New York, he holds a doctorate in law. He spent some years as an associated professor before being engaged in politics. And he has always had an intellectual approach to the problems he was dealing with. And that's why we were often in a good agreement. I think you are the right person to open this Debating Europe series. Thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Caro Presidente.
Dear Chairman, Josep Borrell, dear ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. Just a few words in Italian, then I'll switch to German. As always, it's a great pleasure for me to be in Italy and especially in Florence. Allow me to repeat what I always say when I am in your country, in Italy. You're not all Italians, I know that. If I had a second life, I would like to live it in Italy. Now, for my own comfort and serenity, and also for yours, I'd prefer to continue in German. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the predecessor as President of the European Parliament, Josep Borrell. I'd like to thank him for these very kind words of welcome that he's extended to me. I'd like to mention we had excellent cooperation. I was head of my political faction when Mr. Borrell became president. In his introduction, he said that I was head of the Popular Party, of the Christian Democrats, and nobody's perfect. Well, in response, I'd like to point out that President Borrell, his membership to his party that I don't wish to mention, but Josep Borrell is not the president. He would have never become president of the European Parliament without the support of the European Popular Party. This is my remark to the European Popular Party. But through the grand idea of the unification of Europe, this notion binds us very strongly, and we're personal friends. As I mentioned, I had this wonderful opportunity since 1979 to be a member of the European Parliament without an interruption. And in my approach is not only intellectual and that of an academician, but I'd like to give you a real representation of how issues have developed, European politics, European Parliament as a driver of European unification. Since 1979, when we came together for the first elections, Europe looked quite different. The continent was split up. Berlin was cut in half by a wall and barbed wire. Frequently, the well-intentioned friends have always asked me, why are you a candidate for Strasbourg and Brussels? Why aren't you a candidate for Bonn, where once the German government had its headquarters? Well, had that been possible at the time, in my own party, I was extremely committed in the CDU. My answer was the following: we need to strengthen Europe. It was Western Europe at the time, because we, as Germans, are challenged, cannot come to grips with the large population in our own country. This is an attraction for those Europeans who are not members yet, who were still under the totalitarian regime of communism in 1979. And if one could have predicted in 1979, 3rd of October 1990, Germany would have been united, and that for the first time in 2004, three nations who had been occupied by the Soviet Union, and that is to say Lithuania, Estonia, and Slovenia, that was still part of communist Yugoslavia, that all these would have entered the European Union. If somebody would have told me this in 1979, my answer would have been, well, that may happen one day, but I doubt that it will happen in our lifetime. In 1979, the notion of a community of 27 states seemed like the fulfillment of a dream. But, ladies and gentlemen, this dream has become reality today because we are a valuable community in the European Union, and we must never lose sight of this. And we must rejoice over this development. And we've experienced tremendous challenges. The crisis of the European Union should never make us lose sight of what made us strong and what will make us strong. And that is because it's based on values. 25th of March 2007, and a few days earlier, I was in this European university. So when the two presidents of the European institutions, the Chancellor and Angela Merkel, President of the Commission, but also, and I represented the European Parliament, the Berlin Declaration was signed, recalling the Roman treaties that was signed in 1957, which founded the European Atomic Community and the EU. The declaration said that we are united with great luck, but they're better sounding words than these German ones. But we are united, which is our good luck to be united. Reconciliation between France and Germany and the founding fathers of Europe subscribed to this dream. Robert Schuman and Gasperi and Wagner and later Helmut Kohl and Jacques Delors and others, they pursued the path of reconciliation. And if today you're in Germany, if you're in Poland as a German and receive a prize, then you can feel this historical legacy that is present, that with the French we have overcome, but there are political forces in Poland that use the argument of Germany in their political campaigns, as we have experienced. Jean Monnet once said, "Nothing is possible without people. Nothing can last without institutions." And he's absolutely right. On the 25th of March, and I think of 2007, there was a photograph front of the Brandenburg Gate with the 27 heads of state and the presidents of the European institutions, Javier Solana, and the then Foreign Minister Steinmeier. We were 31 persons in total, and I have a photo in Brussels of this. And more than two-thirds of 31 people no longer occupy those offices today. And what Jean Monnet said is quite right. Nothing is possible without people. The people need to want Europe. But what is decisive, that the institutions are there that live beyond the lives of people. And the history tells of what I wish to express. The institutional issue is important to have strong European institutions. And we need a strong European Parliament. You know that today the European Parliament is dealing with equality today. If you look at the development of democracy and parliamentarianism is of tremendous importance. On the 23rd of April 2009, I signed the climate protection legislation in Europe, and I wish to mention that the European Union is essential in the leadership for the 21st century in combating climate change in Europe, European Union must take on board this topic, and European Parliament is a legislator with the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers, Czech-Peter Neckers, signed this treaty, who's now the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic. This was a wonderful development, and I needn't prove to you how we followed this up and the consultations of the Parliament, the Maastricht, Amsterdam treaties, the co-decision-making processes, and majority decisions in the Ministers' Council. I now come to a point is the Nice Treaty. This was elaborated in December 2000. I will never forget how the President of the European Council, the last French President, he came to the European Parliament. It was Jacques Chirac. He only wanted to stay for 1 hour in order to report on the summit meeting of Nice. He should have come on a Tuesday. And the following Thursday, when Joseph Daul, who is the head of EVP, and he took him with him to his farm, and where he had dinner with his family. And on the way there, he'd said that on the Monday, before the appearance of Jacques Chirac, he had a phone call with him in the European Parliament and told him that if he only wants to come for an hour, he needn't bother to come. And Nice was presented as a great success, but Nice was not a great success. Nice was described how many MPs represent countries that are going to be entering the European Union. And I was in a difficult situation because our political group was splintered off. And our Spanish colleagues said, since the Prime Minister now was in government, and his people said yes to Nice, my political friends from CDUS, we were in the opposition at the time. And what was more important, well, was that Nice was not a European success for us. So in my speech, I said that we will only establish our stand to Nice when we see what comes afterwards. And I was quite emphatic in stating this. Then Jacques Chirac, he welcomed the heads of the parties in Strasbourg, and I apologized to him for having attacked him so vehemently, and he answered, yes, you two have your interests. So he did have an understanding for that. But what is decisive is how the situation is followed up. I had the feeling that another conference had to follow very quickly. And in 2001, we had our conference in Berlin of the Popular Party, and the European Popular Party chairman, Klaus Welle, he was elected unanimously together with the Christian Democrats and Socialists, but also with the Communists and Liberals and Greens. And a request was made to him in the party conference of 2001, where we requested a new conference to make some headway with regard to Europe. And this was particularly important because the dynamics and the refusal of Nice would need to be transformed into a new kind of dynamism. Wilfried Martens, who was the chairman of EVP, And yesterday he mentioned in Brussels how important this political stand was. And in our European Popular Party, what was important was not just to have a new conference. But, ladies and gentlemen, you are all intellectuals, you're academicians, you're professors. It's not enough to write something down. That's a prerequisite. What's important is that you obtain majority for this in politics. And if the vote on this was on a Saturday lunchtime, what's important is to be present. And for those who didn't see Europe as so important or who were critical vis-à-vis Europe, and therefore they left ahead of time, and so we obtained a majority for this, that we wished a new conference. And in the January week in Strasbourg, a colleague arrived from the Socialist Party today, Giorgio Napolitano. And your decision is absolutely wonderful. And he was head of the Constitutional Committee. And he said, do the same in your party families. And we have to look beyond the European Union into our party families. Hence, in the European Parliament, we paved the way for further reform, and the European Parliament would have not created the Lisbon Treaty. You know that the Constitutional Treaty was rejected for completely different reasons in France. I will not mention names, but the foreign minister of the Netherlands at the time, Bent Bot, who was a Christian Democrat, so he was a friend of mine, a convinced European. After saying no, he said, this treaty is dead. I contradicted him in the media of the Netherlands, and he came to my office, and he had people from his ministry with him. How can you say something like that as a foreign minister, that this treaty is dead? We must find a solution, and as long as there is some glow in the fire, we have to fight. And I recall Konrad-Adenauer, where he said that everybody's given something for lost. Then this is when true work begins. This was the same for Joseph Borrell. You must not become discouraged in European politics, even in your private life or on a national level, in European politics. Giving up is the worst thing that can happen, because with our multiple backgrounds, it is so difficult to achieve objectives that this can only be done with patience, but also with enthusiasm. And enthusiasm must remain. Well, you have to know when to apply enthusiasm and when patience. If we look back at Lisbon, the Lisbon Treaty, the European Parliament, where there is co-decision-making in all member states except for tax issues. And the same goes for the Council of Ministers. If you look back at the 60s, when Charles de Gaulle, who was certainly a great man, great statesman, but he didn't want France to be overridden in legislation by Luxembourg. So in the Council of Ministers, we have majority decision-making in legislation. I'd like to briefly pinpoint one issue, the Treaty of Lisbon. Many participated in this Lisbon Treaty. There's a lot of merit that goes to many other people. Now, 2003, membership of 10 countries in the European Union. European Parliament, I can't present everything in great detail, but without the European Parliament, Slovakia, Lithuania and Estonia would not have entered the European Union. And in the latter part of 2009, I was a substitute, and the negotiations with these three countries was conducted also under my leadership. Now, let's look at the present difficult situation, not only on account of the situation in Greece and the European currency. We've never had to come to grips in the European Union with such a situation. To stabilize a joint currency and to help countries with their difficulties is something that shouldn't be lost sight of. We have a free exchange of capitals, goods, and persons, free circulation. If we didn't have the European Union and had to assert ourselves with the great nations in the country, like China, Russia, and Japan, and the United States, I also recommend that we study the situation in China. It is correct that China is going to be a great power, but the tensions in China are very great, not only religious ones, but there is a democracy there, and a time will come when democracy will be more widespread, and then this situation there will need to be studied. There's never been such a far-reaching project in Europe as a single currency. We are 17 members. In these turbulent times, if we didn't have a single currency, all countries would have had great drawbacks. Nevertheless, it must be said, and I say it self-critically as a German, the Stability Pact was installed in 2003 thanks to France and Germany, and each country has become indebted beyond the threshold, and this has been impeded by Brussels. This must not be repeated again, and I recommend to many Germans today who are very critical vis-à-vis other countries also to look at their own countries, because Germany, together with France, did not give a good example, because both France and Germany exceeded their indebtedness. Now, in these last weeks and months, a lot has been achieved in the Euro Summit meeting in June 2011 in Brussels. The Rescue Fund, European Financial Stability Facility was created. 250 was raised to 380 billion euros. Emergency credits can be granted to countries in crisis for 440 billion. This has been ratified in many national parliaments, including Germany. In Germany, we had 523 for, 85 against, and a few abstentions. A framework which is made available of 130 23 billion will be raised to, I will do it a bit more slowly. It may last 2-3 minutes longer. The law endorsed by Germany, the framework guaranteed by Germany, will be raised from 123 billion euros to 211 billion euros by taking on board more flexible tools which will increase the efficiency of the facility. And the raising this fund to 211 billion is a considerable sum. German politics and the media, but the German contribution is the highest because it is the largest economy. One needs to explain to people why this is necessary. We have to be cohesive in a world that is undergoing change. Otherwise, this will be undermining other countries. European Parliament has an economic governance package, a six-pack, and this has a decisive role now in laying down the stability criteria, has, thanks to the European Parliament, and I now cannot dwell on the details on account of time reasons. But ladies and gentlemen, it is important that we focus on the stability criteria laid down in the Maastricht Agreement. And if the member states clean up their own household budgets, this corresponds to the logic of the Maastricht Treaty. This is not undermining the sovereignty because with 3% indebtedness, national parliaments have accepted that there must be no high level of indebtedness, because if you look into national budgets, this is a consequence which has emerged from what was laid down in the Maastricht Treaty. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now talking about Germany because I was asked to do so, but within the Liberal Party of FDP, the party of Hans-Dietrich Genscher, who's not expressing himself against the stability facility, but again, the 2013 decisions, FDP is deciding whether the stability facility should be set up. And one needs to make a survey amongst the party members. This is critical because if we ask ourselves how we are to come to grips with the European issues, and we question this within 27 countries that have coalition parties, this would not be feasible within the European Union. I hope that Hans-Friedrich Genscher, I've been informed that he wishes to focus on this point, and he hopes to obtain the green light from his party. But by asking the members of the party, members, I am not in favor of following this path regarding these types of matters. When you are looking at matters of making money available and you carry out a survey amongst national parties and the outcome could impede a European project, I think this is not the right way to go. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to think more about Europe. We need to look at the economic policies. Our French friends call it economic governance. I think one should say a better coordination and a better cooperation of economic policies and how this should be organized. You have the President of European Council, who is also responsible for the matters related to the euro. But I also think that the European Community institutions, that the European Commission should be involved in these issues of economic governance. And only when the Commission has a strong role, then the Parliament will have control over the Commission. We cannot control the European Commission as the European Parliament, but we can control the aspects of democratic control are important. When I'm not against democracy when questioning party members. And if the Commission has an important role to play, then the European Parliament will equally have a strong role. European Council can recommend guidelines and directives. I don't mean this from a legal, technical way, but to give political guidelines which need to be implemented through legislation, through the European Commission, and then which is then submitted to Parliament. Just two conclusive remarks. We now find ourselves at the beginning of a debate of the financial framework of European Union, the period 2013 to 2020. We have had small circle debates, and regarding 2005, and this is why you have to learn from history. 2005, the heads of state decided on the means for cultural policies, Erasmus, lifelong learning, Leonardo, and decided to cut these programs by 3 billion euros. Rosa Borrell was chairing this, and in December 2005, just before Christmas, and the future president, who was then the Chancellor of Austria. And this was taking place in the Hofburg in Vienna. In 2006, he was taking on the chairmanship. And the chair of Josep Borrell, I was sitting to the right of him. I was the first to take the floor because I represent the largest group. And I told the Chancellor of Austria, the future president of the European Council, that I'm strongly bound to, but these personal relations have no role to play, because if the European Council or Council of Ministers, and if Erasmus does not receive more money, my party will say no. And if the government decides this means that the decision is final. And the answer is no. Other parties, the Greens and the Liberals, took the same decision. And so the government had to allocate that money again. And those who have institutional responsibilities have to see to it that the institutions that have the means for culture need to increase those amounts, because also what you do in Florence deals with the very heart of Europe, and these exchange leads to the enrichment of the European spirit and soul. And a conclusive remark as to foreign policy, since I find it of paramount importance, and in a preliminary discussion we discussed the development in the Islamic and Arab states and the development relationship between Palestine and Israel. I'd like to mention this because in its foreign policy, the European Union should take on a leading role. And if there's no peace between Israel and Palestine, and in the last week, European Parliament took a majority decision on this point, there will be no peace, no recognition of both states, Israel behind secure borders and Palestine behind secure borders. If this does not occur, we will have a warlike situation for the future, but also our relationships to the Arab and Islamic world will become hampered, and we shall do our utmost as a European Union to accompany and foster the peace process, Israel and Palestine behind secure borders, and we should support the Arab Springs. We never have the guarantee that those who are fighting for their values, that are also our values in Syria, in Cairo, or in Tunisia, we have no guarantee that they will win. It could be that others will win who have a more fundamentalistic approach, but as Europeans, we have no other opportunity than to support those who fight for freedom, peace. And I'd like to conclude with a word used by an Israeli, Natan Sharansky, who left the Soviet Union in 1986. He was exchanged in Berlin. It was an exchange of spies, dissidents from the Soviet Union. He came from the Ukraine, and he was exchanged for a spy from the Soviet Union. He is Israeli, and I visited him recently in Israel. And in our personal dialogue, and I'm not indiscreet when I say this, and he also mentioned this in public, he is again a dissident in Israel today because he believes that one should support the movement for freedom in Israel, whether Netanyahu is very reluctant to do so because one feels that stability is undermined. These are justified statements, and Sharansky stated, and I will read this out slowly, he refers to the Arab world. This great awakening cannot simply be wished away. It has been silenced, maybe. It will take time because it has been drowned out, but it cannot be drowned out once and for all. And today it has brought about something of historical value. It has destroyed prejudices that the Muslim and Arab peoples of the Middle East, in contrast to us, they never found a true freedom, and they had to come to terms living in communities that were dominated by fear. So with tremendous courage, they merely put their lives at stake in order to teach us something better. It's a bit complicated, but what we thought was impossible, that there was this resolve for democracy and freedom in the Arab world, these were true pioneers. And the tremendous challenge is that these persons put their lives at stake for those values. And if you look at certain developments as Europeans, we have no other choice but to support this movement for freedom. And as a European Union, we should do our utmost to attain a peaceful treaty with Israel. I've exceeded my time. I think we need to be cautious. Pessimists never achieve anything, and the European Union's policy, if you follow it through from the 50s through the 70s and 80s, and until if we look at the Lisbon Treaty, these was marked by ups and downs. But what was important is to be determined. And if we look at Africa, China, Asia, or the United States, with the tensions between Obama and the Tea Party, I'm convinced that with all the challenges we're faced with in Europe, we are still the better part of this world. And this work of the unification of Europe must be built with patience, and especially in the European University in Florence, which is the heart of Europe. And I think we should all be encouraged, and we will achieve our objectives in Europe if we stay resolved with enthusiasm and with patience. I'd like to thank Professor Borrell and thank the professors and all those who are carrying out research and studies here. I express my thanks for this invitation, for also the spirit that reigns here is very encouraging, and I think we should walk this path together towards European unification, and I wish you best of success.
Thank you, dear Hans-Gert. As you have seen, it's difficult to find someone else who could explain the role of the European Parliament, having been a so long-lasting member of the Parliament, Chairman of the Parliament, Speaker of the Parliament, head of the most important political group. Thank also for having talked about the German attitude towards the crisis. We are in a difficult situation, and I'm sure all of you will be interested in talking about it. Before asking Professor Dittier to lead the change of views, I would like to offer you a little book done by some professor of the Institute. It's called Life in the Eurozone, with or without sovereign default. It has got quite an important success, and there are a lot of ideas about how to deal with this crisis. We are very much interested in knowing how the German people look at that. At the beginning I told you are truly European, and your feeling of Europe, as my feeling of Europe, was built on the ideal of peace. Maybe this ideal is not enough for the new generation of Europeans. For you and me, the war was there. For the new generation of Europeans, for our young students coming here, it was a very, very, very far away event. Like for me, the Cuba War between Spain and the United States. It's another century event. So how can we build the willingness, la voglia si dice in italiano, no? La voglia dell'Europa. Perché essere europeo? To call about the peace is not enough. So let's talk about it. And thanks again for one thing that I didn't mention, you did, your engagement for the peace in Palestine. I am very much aware how much did you work on that, to try that Europe could play a bigger, a more important role on building the peace between Israel and Palestine. Thank you for that. I could offer you another book about this subject. I will do it later.
Please sign.
I will sign it. Professor Dittier, can you take the lead, please, of the debate?
Thank you very much again, Hans-Gert Pöttering, for this fascinating overview of insight, views from the European Parliament on important institutional developments since Nizza, but also on foreign policy and the expanding of European policy making as such. What I found particularly striking, maybe in order to get a discussion going, is that you mentioned and you underlined patience. You said you need patience for institutional development, for policy change in the European Union. However, right now we are in the situation where we don't have much time. We are driven by the international financial markets and the usual way of incremental, slow institutional changes in the European Union. And indeed, policy change is something which has been put into question. So I would suggest that we open the floor now for comments and questions. Who would like to start?
Jean-Michel Lachan, Florence School at the European Institute. President Pöttering, first, many thanks for your smart and very enthusiastic vision on European affairs. My question will have a limited scope, but very precise one. If I remember correct, the coming president of the parliament will be German, as are the presidents of the Energy Committee, Environment Committee, and Energy Commissioner. Then, as Europeans, could we expect unprecedented move of the European energy policy? Could you expect in Germany a more pro-European energy policy, or from Germany a more European energy policy at the European level? It's a narrow scope outside of the financial crisis, but it should say a lot about the future of Europe.
If you would speak to Germans, as far as positions in the European Union are concerned, they would say, oh, the Germans on a proportional level have not enough functions, for instance, in the foreign service. I don't know whether your professor wanted to say there are so many Germans. It was not your intention. Okay. And that a German will become president of the European Parliament, probably with our support, and I'm supporting it strongly, that Martin Schulz becomes president of the Parliament, is not a decision by the Germans, it's a decision of the Socialist Group, because he is a leader of the Socialist Group, as they decided some years ago that Josep Borrell was the candidate. And Josep Borrell had a competitor who was a great personality as well. It was Bronislaw Geremek. But anyhow, leave the thing with the Germans for a moment away. Your question was energy policy. I think the Germans have understood that energy policy and climate change questions are of greatest importance. And I can only hope that now we don't forget our ambition as far as our fight against climate change is concerned. We took the lead as Europeans in the European Union. I mentioned that we signed our legislation, and we should do everything to reduce CO2. And there, of course, is a problem now with the stop of nuclear power. You can be in favor, but it has consequences for CO2. And so we have to do everything to develop new energy and trying to prevent an increase of CO2. And I think that our Chancellor, Angela Merkel, who was Minister for Environment, has a good understanding for this, and the Commissioner for Energy as well. And so the renewables are very important. And there is another point as far as energy is concerned, and it's an aspect connected with foreign politics. I think we should prevent to come into a situation that the European Union can be pressed by countries from whom we get oil or gas. For instance, if Russia, and I would not say they will do, but there is always a fear, as we know some years ago, the dispute between Russia and Ukraine we had delivering gas. We should never be totally dependent, or we should never be dependent only on one partner as far as the deliver of oil and gas is concerned. And so we need to have diversification in the field of energy supply as far as it comes from outside. And that's why I promote with my rhetoric, I have not an institutional role anymore, but I support strongly the Nabucco project, that we have this Nabucco pipeline from Azerbaijan through Turkey and then to the European Union. So it gives us a little bit more diversification. I'm not against gas from Russia, not at all, but we should never, as European Union, come into a situation that the energy supply is used as an instrument for foreign policy and for pressure. Professor, as far as your question to the future of the European Union is concerned, I would be much more worried if we would not have the Lisbon Treaty, because the Lisbon Treaty gives us a very solid legal basis for our European legislation, and nobody can take it away. But of course we have to be very attentive. The last Danish government introduced, as you know, a sort of border controls, and we resisted those developments, and I'm very happy that the new government in Denmark, are you Danish? Ah, very nice. I see you're smiling, so you're quite happy. Although the new government does not belong to my political family, and so you see my European point of view, I'm very happy
to have one or two at least.
Yes, of course. So I'm very happy that your Prime Minister, the lady, has decided to abolish those new instruments of border control. So we have to be careful, but we are the legislation, and Schengen is now part of the communitarian system. And we in Germany have ministers, not on the federal level, but in the Länder, a minister for the interior, who criticize the Commission when Mrs. Malmström says we want to have a look and we want to decide whether the European law is violated, and she has a right to do so. But then there are ministers of the interior from the Länder level who say these European bureaucrats should not decide what we want to do on national level. So there is a rhetoric which is a little bit frightening, but we are opposing it. The future of the European Union in 20 years or 10 years, a strong European Union, being active in foreign policy. We need to increase our ambitions in foreign security and defense affairs. We all know that the national budgets are going down, so it would be very necessary that in the military field we cooperate more to harmonize arms and so on. So we have to go steps there as well, and we should not only stick to this problem which we have and have to solve with the debt of member states and with the euro. We have to continue our integration in other fields as well, and this applies especially for foreign affairs, security and defense. Then we should continue to take the lead in the fight against climate change, and of course we always should be the strongest community in the world to defend human rights. And if we don't do it as Europeans, there are not so many who do it, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. So there are two questions. Could you maybe mention your name?
I'm Jean Monnet, Chair in the History of European Integration at the University of Florence. First of all, thanks a lot, because you said many important and specific things. And I would like to remind the fact that at the very moment you were being elected, so you were in the House, and there are some, I would say, 10, 15 years between you and me. I was outside, and we were around Mario Albertini, the Federalist thinker, and he was delivering a speech about the importance of the European Parliament and the way a directly elected European Parliament might contribute to European. And I would say, I would like to stress the difference in between the title in German and in English of your presentation, because you're talking about Einigung, and we have European integration. I think Einigung is a bit stronger. Do you feel like I do that the European Parliament is at the moment the real strongest force that could give momentum to the Einigung process in this moment of crisis? Do you feel like I do that some of the things that were in the federalist critique along these 30 years are much to the point when they say that we should change, in some sense, constituencies. What I mean is that you were very right in stressing, according to me, and probably according to many people in this room, that what you build when you are in the European Parliament is a kind, not only of a European approach things, but a sense of Europeans doing something for a kind of European people. The problem is that we have to still to build this European people, I would say, and how can you really build it when European elections are mainly done in national constituencies and, of course, are generally part of a national debate? What about the idea of transnational constituencies? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I understood only your first name. So, Max, I understood. Okay, if I may call you Max, it's very fine. I think that the European Parliament plays already a very important role today. And I mentioned that last week in Strasbourg we passed this sixth package concerning the strengthening of the Stability Pact. And this would not exist if the European Parliament, and of course there was a discussion and controversy as well, but if the European Parliament had not taken such a strong position. And so we moved the Council, the position of the Council in the end as well, and so we found a compromise. And this shows that the European Parliament understands its own role more and more as a very responsible defender of our European policy, and we can be a real motor for the European development. The question, citizens, I'm not totally sure. The acoustic might have been a little bit difficult between you and myself, or my understanding. I think it's very vital that the members of the European Parliament have a good contact to the citizens in their constituency. To give you an example, I can only speak from my own experience. For 20 years, until the 1st of October last year, I was chairman of my party in my region, in the region of Osnabrück. So, and this brought it with it that I had always to have close contact to the local level, to the regional level, and to the national level as well. Of course, because of my positions in the European Parliament, I always had good contact to the national level. I was member of the presidency of my party for 10 years, as chairman of our group, as president of Parliament, and so part of the leading 20 people of my party. But the other levels are very important as well. And I think this is a message we have to give to our people, to our citizens, that Europe begins there where we live. People who live in Florence, for them, Italy and Europe begins here. Or people living in small villages. Europe, or in my case, Germany, begins there where the people live. Then we have a regional identity, very differently in Europe. But here in Tuscany has a strong identity, a very nice one. Then we have a national identity and the national citizenship. You know all this, but I want to express that this belongs together. The national citizenship gives us the union, the citizenship of the European Union. And so this all belongs together. And then we have a responsibility for the world. When I make my speeches, I always say, who only sees his home, what we call Heimat in German, who sees only where we are, the city, who only sees this, will never be able to defend his home or his Heimat. Who puts his own nation above all other nations is a nationalist, and nationalism, as François Mitterrand has said before the European Parliament, nationalism in the end means war. And who only feels as a European has no roots And so this belongs together, where you are at home, your region, your country, and the European Union. And I think here we have still a great task, a great responsibility to teach this to our citizens. And as far as transnationalists are concerned, I would be in favor, but I don't see it that it will come to the next elections. The next elections we will have 2014. I don't see such a development because there is a priority now for other questions, and in politics you always have to set priorities, and the priority now is the difficulties with the debt rate and the euro and governance and other questions. But I would agree that the European Parliament, maybe after the next elections, take an initiative for transnational lists as well.
Hello, I'm a researcher from the SPS department in the fourth year from Germany, and well, I wanted to speak. It's quite connected to your question. Into the mouse. It's quite connected to your question, and maybe this was before not answered, but I want to speak a little bit more on the behalf of young Europeans, what we are, more or less. And I mean, there was much talk before about, okay, you don't know the war, you don't know the walls, and all this is forgotten, so you don't know about the European idea. I mean, the European idea basically pretty much sits here in kind of young researchers and so on. The problem with this is that, I mean, we are scared to death at the moment. Whomever I talk to in Germany, Italy, here at the Institute, as young researchers that have a bit to do with political systems, political economy and so on, hey, we are scared to death that this is all going to go down. This is all going to explode. And what we see as kind of the solutions that are put on the table on the European level, piecemeal deals, night shifts, since 6 months, there's no real outcome, there's no vision. So in your talk, there was a little bit about visions, about an economic government and so on. It seems not enough to us. So what I would like to hear from you maybe, if you could play institutional God of Europe for now 5 minutes, and really draw up a picture what you really would like to see on the European level set in place as institutions, how the institutional framework could really work so that such a crisis would not happen again. How would it look like? Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. Joseph, so I think together we have to find the vision. And we should not always say, you are the researchers, so you should make your effort and come on the basis of your research to a result. I think it's very important to strengthen the European institutions. Of course, it would be wishful to have the President of the Commission and the President of the European Council as one person. But one may discuss it. But it would not be very practical to start such a discussion now when we have to solve other things. And so the first priority now is to stabilize the European institutions. And we should know what we want. Finance and economy is not something what we call capitalism. I'm totally against a capitalistic or capitalist system. It was a great achievement to get into the Treaty of Lisbon the wording, the model for the European Union is a competitive social market economy. And in a time like this, we have to give an answer, what this in reality means. We believe in the market, because the market are we all, but we are not in favor of a totally uncontrolled market. That would be a capitalist system. So the market always has to play a social role. The market has to serve the people, and there might always be differences what means to serve the people. But the question as such, we have to agree on. And that's why we need financial regulations. And the European Parliament passed some legislation already, and we passed the sixth package. I spoke about it. And we should be clear that the banks and the experiences we had in the last years should not repeat again, and that we need European legislation. And this Transaktionssteuer, I don't know what that is in English.
Transaction tax, Tobin tax. It's the Tobin tax.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we have decided now in some countries, or some countries have decided to create such a tax. And I think we should go on with that. So we need to be clear with our concept that a social market economy, and it's not capitalism, and we should use our European institutions, make them strong, and not fall back to an intergovernmental system. Intergovernmental system means that you have not a democratic control. And so I am in favor to do as much as possible with the Commission. In the end, there might be compromises. This you can never prevent. But the Commission, we have not to invent new bodies. The bodies are there, that's the Commission. And then the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers has to play its role. And what we hear now from the Council of Ministers, not the European Council, from the Council of Ministers, they are very worried that the European Council takes all the decisions and not anymore the Council of Ministers. And for the first time they come to the European Parliament, at least what I hear from the now institutional responsible people, that the Council of Ministers asks the European Parliament to defend the institutional system of the European Union because the Council of the European Union is becoming so powerful. Yes, Philip. Joseph, sorry.
One quick follow-up. So do you think that
Do you think in the end the Commission should be responsible to the Parliament and should be elected by the Parliament?
But this is the case today. I had a controversy with some people when I spoke about these ministers of the interior, you remember, in the context of Schengen. And I said recently in a speech in Brussels that the members of the Commission have more legitimation, one says this, legitimation, are more legitimate than the ministers on the federal, not on the federal, on the Länder level in Germany. And then somebody told me, but this is not true for Bavaria. In Bavaria, the whole government needs the support of the Landtag, of the Länder Parliament. I would not like to say for the Landtag of Bavaria provincial parliament this would not be adequate. So, but this is something for the Germans. And you should know, and you certainly will know it, Josep. We have two votes for the Commission. One for the President of the Commission, and one for the whole Commission. And then the commissioners, before they get the confidence vote, have to go to a hearing. And this is really something. And I suffered as chairman of my group in 2004 with the first Barroso Commission. We got support for Barroso, and I played some role in this. I don't want to be too proud or so, but it's really so, and it was really a hard job. And then we were in danger that Barroso, in a second vote with the whole Commission, might fail because we had a discussion about some commissioners who were not wanted by some parts of the European Parliament. So I don't mention the names because I don't want to go back to this discussion. And I was really in greatest fear that to have Barroso, which was a great success for the EPP, and you were elected one day before him, Josep, and the day after you, Barroso was elected, and I remember that somebody in the presidency of my party in Berlin said, oh, it might be very dangerous first to vote for the socialists and the next day only to vote for our person. So you know what I suffered to get all this. But anyhow, so my message is there is really legitimation for the Commission, and we should not accept rhetoric from in our national states that there are only bureaucrats in the European Commission. This is not true, and they have their responsibility, and I think we should defend our institutions, and this is a responsibility for you, if you allow me to say this, and all the researchers as well, and we have a shared responsibility, Joseph, if you allow me to say.
Rebecca Wolfsberg is a student, a researcher of SPS as well.
Well, and thank you as well for the very interesting presentation, or your lecture. And I am indeed from Denmark and very happy with the recent developments. So good ideas can come from both sides, obviously. But Denmark has had, among other countries, a lot of Euroscepticism. And that so Euroscepticism seems to be growing? Huh? Right. So with the growing Euroscepticism that we see in a lot of member states, do you see a dilemma for the European Parliament, which has been a very pro-European, or at least it's been a great driver for further integration for the democratic entities, but if the populations in the member states grow more Eurosceptic, can you say there's a dilemma if it is to also represent its constituents? Can it still be this driver of integration if the populations grow more skeptical?
Thank you so much. You are stressing a very important point. And just yesterday I took part in Brussels in the presentation of a book written by somebody whose name is Florian Hartleb. Florian Hartleb, he is a German, and he studied these new forms of populism, the so-called True Finns, and then the movement in Austria, in some other countries as well. And I would like to recommend this book to you. You might read German, I think. And Florian Hartleb is his name. I think these developments are possibly dangerous, and it's very important that the parties like myself, the Social Democrats or Socialists, the Liberals, the Greens, and the Greens have, I don't want to praise the Greens now, this would be totally mistaken, but they have made a long way as far as Europe is concerned. When they came for the first time into the European Parliament in 1979, they had the same system like RPR in France, the rule more of the members, because they did not want to take it too serious. And now they are defenders of the European idea, but I don't want to make now Werbung. What is Werbung?
To advertise, publicity.
For the Greens, but I'm just saying how they have changed. I think my message is that we have to stay together now. And in Germany, with the agreement to the EFSF, to the money, the 211 billion, of course the government tried to find its own majority, what they call the Chancellor majority. And it would have been bad for the government if they would have failed. But as a European, I was very happy to hear that the opposition, not the old communists, but the left, but the Social Democrats and the Greens were supporting this package, and I was very happy about this. And I think it's very, very necessary for Europe that the European parties stay together and resist this populism and not start to be a little bit populist and to give in to such a development. We have to fight for our ideas. Like in Denmark, if you start to have a little bit of border control, then next time when the populists want more, you will give in again. And I think we have to resist. But we have to explain, and there we could be better, the parties. But the media have an important role to play as well, to explain our public, our citizens, why Europe is so important. And I could give you figures about, but I have not to give it here, about the demographic development. And if you hear these figures, that the Europeans in 2015, if the demographic development will realize as it is foreseen, then the Europeans, not the European Union, the Europeans will be 7% of the world population, and we were 24% in the year 1900. And the Germans will be, and I tell it to my compatriots, will be 0.7%. And then I say, how will you defend your values and interests if not with the Europeans together? So I don't know whether this is an answer. We have to continue our work. Thank you so much, and congratulations, not for your new government, but for the decision of your new government.
Could you please mention your name too?
Dirk Moses, I'm a professor of global and European colonial history here at the Institute. I was heartened that you mentioned the Arab-Israeli conflict, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit now that you have a little more time. I was curious about your framing of it. You said there was a kriegsähnliche Zustände, it was like a war perhaps, or leading up to war, which implies a kind of symmetry. But really, is there a symmetry here? We have an occupation by one state of a stateless people. What is the European Union and your government doing about this? Also in relation to the human rights question, which you raised before. I was somewhat surprised, given the even-handed, balanced approach that the Germans tend to take on this, that Angela Merkel was so appalled by the expansion of the settlements in Gilo just a few days ago, and then rang up Netanyahu. I mean, what's really going on there? Do you understand what I'm getting at? Yeah, I'm really wondering how even-handed is this, and what is the EU doing to protect the human rights of Palestinians?
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. It's really, the subject is perhaps the most difficult one in foreign affairs. And asking me as chairman of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, foundation which is near to the Christian Democratic Union, which always had very close relations to Israel, and I'm very much in favor of that. And I said in the European Parliament 2 weeks ago that the defense of the security of Israel is part of the Staatsräson, the raison d'être, the raison d'état of Germany. I agree. But having said that, and I added this does not legitimize that we as Germans remain quiet against injustice which is done to the Palestinians. And saying this, for me, as a German and as chairman of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, is something which you would not really appreciate. But it was, in my party, in the Adenauer Foundation, always the policy. The Israelis may do wrong things, we don't speak about it because of our history. And of course, we Germans, and I have made a speech before the Knesset, as Joseph, you have done it as well, I guess, for the Knesset, the 30th of May 2007. It was my most difficult speech in my whole life. And there was a part concerning the Holocaust, and nobody could criticize it, because I have so deep feelings what has happened. This is the worst crime ever committed in the history of the world. But this does not allow us to remain quiet to what is happening to the Palestinians as far as the settlements are concerned. And my government, and I know the position of Angela Merkel quite well, and we have recently discussed it on a personal basis as well, I think I can go so far to say, in principle, she agrees to my position. But she is not the chairman of the Adenauer Foundation or an ex-president of the European Parliament. She is a Chancellor of Germany. And this is some other responsibility, and I think she tries everything to convince the government in Jerusalem to stop the settlements, and on this basis she has relations with Netanyahu, and his foreign minister is called Liebermann. And those who understand German, I always say in my speeches, Mr. Liebermann ist nicht ein Liebermann. Liebermann means a nice man, and I say in German. And Liebe means love, so I think this is a totally inappropriate word for this gentleman. So I think, and the basis of politics, at least for me, is always the dignity of the human being. And how the Palestinians are treated does not respect the dignity of the Palestinians. Having said that, one has to add, I'm totally against terrorism, and people who use terrorism as an argument and kill other people deserve the right reaction. So hopefully what is happening now in Syria is hopefully leading to a situation that the support for Hamas might be stopped in the future if there is a change of the government. But we don't know in which way there is a change of the government. I will give you a last example. Sorry. I got a telephone call yesterday from a German lady who is very near to the Grand Mufti of Damascus. And Joseph, if you remember, in the year 2008, we invited religious people to the European Parliament. It was a year of dialogue of cultures. And we invited the Grand Mufti of Damascus, Hassoun. And Hassoun is near to the Assad regime because he was appointed by Assad or by this regime. But he is very open in the cooperation with other religions. And although one must be very critical to the Assad regime, but one thing is true, the religions can relatively live free in Syria. And so I had some month ago a telephone call with Hassoun, and because I had written a letter to him, asking him to try to use his position to try to make compromises between the government and the demonstrators. And then he told me how that more security people were killed than demonstrators, and he defended the government and so on. And so finally our telephone contact was without result and stopped quite unfriendly. And now yesterday, this lady who organized the visit of Hassoun to the Adenauer Foundation, he was not only in the European Parliament in 2008, he was last year in the Adenauer Foundation. And this lady had organized it. And she said the Grand Mufti is in a very, very bad state, in very bad health condition. I said, why? Yeah, he was so frustrated with your discussion. But I said, this cannot be the discussion with me, that he has health problems. But then she told me, and this the reason why I'm saying this, one of his sons, his youngest son, was killed last week on his way to the university. And I said, who killed him? They are not totally sure who killed him, but the answer now is, this may be propaganda, I don't know, but the answer so far, the regime is given in the television, and it was 20 times, this lady told me, on television, that fundamentalists from Saudi Arabia killed the son because the father, this Grand Mufti Hassoun, is so open to other religions. And so things are very, very complex. I don't know what finally the truth is, but this shows the complexity of the situation in the Arab countries. And we should, I can only underline this again, should support those who defend the dignity of the human being and a democratic system. If we would not support them, they would have lost. But if we support them, they at least hopefully might have a chance.
One last question. Yes, please. Could you say your name?
Yes. My name is Agustin Rossi. I'm student of first year of political science. You were mentioning that the ideal of Europe is linked with the social market economy, and my impression is that, especially in the austerity measures are being pushed in Southern European countries, there's a lot of market, but there's not really. I don't see the social part. I mean, privatizations, reducing of the welfare state doesn't sound very social to me. So that's one of the first doubt is if you still consider that the idea of Europe at the moment is still a social market economy. And that's also linked, in my interpretation, is that Southern Europeans, especially young Southern Europeans, were usually really Europeistic in their attitudes. How do you think this is going to affect those attitudes now? Because I think that for a lot of young people, Europe is not longer an ideal of progress, but an idea of suffering for their own economies and for their lives.
That was a harsh statement.
Yeah, okay, I accept. Of course. What is your age? 24. Okay, my youngest son is 28, so he would not argue this way, but I can understand what you say. I think we always need a balance in our social welfare system. And if you overdo it, then in the end, the people who are not on the best side of society will lose. And this we see now. And I'm not an expert for the situation in Greece, and I'm far beyond having a position criticizing them as losers or people who cannot manage their society. This always goes around. And my own country, the Germans, between 1933 and 1945, have done enough of bad things for the whole future of my country. So one should always have an adequate evaluation of situations. So I argue with sympathy as far as Greece is concerned. They overdid it with the social system. And the predecessor government, Karamanlis, he is a personal good friend. When I saw him, it was always very cordial. But he really did not make a step to improve the situation of his country, and this is very frustrating. And so we need a good balance for everything. And if you send your clientele, what would that be? Clientele, your people of your party, different parties, to give them jobs, you send them just into the administration, although you don't need them. Finally, this will collapse. And Greece is now in a situation to make reforms. And I have a great admiration for Georgios Papandreou, that he as a socialist has to make all these decisions, and I'm not at all happy with the opposition that belongs to my party, Nea Demokratia, and the leader of Nea Demokratia, Mr. Samaras, once left his party and went to the right, and then he came back and took the party over and is now the chairman of the party. So what we need now in Greece and of course in other countries and in Germany as well, we need reforms, but we at the same time have to help Greece to become competitive again. And this will not happen in 1 or 2 years, it's a long way. And Professor, you spoke about energy. Why do we not help, and this is an idea of Günther Oettinger, the energy commissioner, to help Greece to develop solar energy and bring solar energy from Greece to the north of Europe. So we need not only to reduce the deficit, but we should give an impetus to Greece as well for greater competitiveness in the future. And there is a working group, as I understood from the Commission, that will make proposals within the next days or weeks, and so hopefully we can improve the situation. And when you say the young generation might be frustrated, but you have different young generations. There are some countries who have now, and we have discussed it, to help with billions and billions of euros. And some young people are not happy because in the south of Europe because they have no jobs, and other young people in other countries where they have jobs, they are not happy that we use their money or their national money to assist the others. So I am trying, and I think we all should do this, trying for an attitude of solidarity, and solidarity means that those who are in trouble, that they have to analyze their situation and make their contribution for a better future, and then those who are in a better situation, help them. And this is, I think, European solidarity. And I think this is was the last contribution, so then this will be my final word. I am deeply convinced, without solidarity, the European Union will have no future. And if you exclude a country, when a country has a problem from the solidarity, you exclude it from the Eurozone or even the European Union, then in the end, there might be only 2 or 3 or 1 or none be left. So solidarity is a basis of our future, and it's a basis of our self-interest. Solidarity is not only something for the other, whom you want to help, it's help for yourself, because we as Europeans can only, and this is my deepest belief, defend our values and interests in the world of the 21st century if we do it together as a European family.
Okay, things are not easy, as you can say, but thank you very much to Hans-Gert for giving us his very interesting point of view. Now the German community inside the UI community are especially invited to have a drink with Hans-Gert Pöttering, and later we are going to visit Villa Salviati, which is part of our European future. Thank you for attending.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. But it's quite difficult. It's a challenge here.
It was so terrible.
Okay, bye-bye. Yeah, bye-bye.
Ja,